They were icons, legends, larger than life, but even the brightest stars couldn't escape the curse of the early hair transplant era. In the 60s, 70s, and beyond, a wave of celebrities rushed to reverse time using crude surgical techniques that promised youth and delivered disaster. What they got instead were plug lines, patchwork scalps, and some of the most awkward cover-ups in Hollywood history. From doll head disasters to cornrow catastrophes, these botched procedures became cautionary tales, and in some cases, unintentional comedy. But behind the hairlines were real stories of image, pressure, regret, and the price of perfection in a spotlight that never turns off. Here are 10 of the most infamous celebrity hair transplant fails ever caught on camera. Frank Sinatra's hair disaster on live TV. It's one thing to age gracefully, but it's another to try and outsmart nature on national television. In the 1960s, Frank Sinatra, one of the world's biggest stars, underwent one of the earliest hair transplant surgeries using the plug method. The result? A scalp that looked like a patchy doll's head, with circular tufts of mismatched hair growing in all directions. Sinatra's transplant was so unnatural that photographers had to hide it with careful lighting, and makeup teams stayed on standby. Things came to a head in a 1965 TV special, when sweat from the hot studio lights exposed the infamous plug pattern mid-performance. Despite the embarrassment, this moment became a turning point in public awareness about celebrity cosmetic procedures. Even legends like Sinatra couldn't fake perfection forever, and this mishap added a strange sort of humanity to his carefully maintained image. Burt Reynolds and the Battle of the Bad Hairline. Sometimes, chasing perfection only makes the flaws louder. In the early 1970s, Burt Reynolds, the legendary Smokey and the Bandit star, underwent a series of hair transplants that turned into one of Hollywood's most infamous cosmetic misfires. His new hairline was too straight, too low, and too thick in all the wrong places, giving him a painted-on, wig-like look. Reynolds later confessed it was a mistake, admitting he should have embraced his baldness instead of chasing surgical fixes. He went through years of follow-up procedures, but each one only added scars, damage, and regret. What makes it especially tragic is that he never needed it. Burt's charm, confidence, and rugged appeal were already doing the heavy lifting. In the end, the fake hair didn't add to his legend, it distracted from it. Sammy Davis Jr. and the shadow of a hairline. Sometimes, trying to look younger only makes you look more artificial. In the late 1960s, Rat Pack icon Sammy Davis Jr. underwent a hair transplant that ended up clashing with his age, style, and natural charisma. The result was a thick, unnatural patch at the front of his scalp that looked more like a toupee made from his own hair. Stage lights only made it worse, casting harsh shadows that exposed the sharp contrast between the plugs and his naturally thinning sides. Davis piled on pompadours and product to cover it up, but the more he styled, the more damage he caused to what hair he had left. By the 1970s, his look was a mix of transplants, extensions, and careful combing, all to chase an illusion. The tragedy is, Sammy's natural look matched his bold, expressive stage presence perfectly. In trying to hide what time gave him, he dimmed the shine of what made him magnetic in the first place. William Shatner's hairline, the final frontier. Not even Starfleet could save him from the era of bad transplants. In the late 1960s, during his iconic run as Captain Kirk, William Shatner underwent multiple hair transplant procedures using the crude plug method of the time. The result was a thick, immovable hairline that looked the same for decades, even as the rest of him aged. His scalp showed dense rows of brush-like plugs that never receded, creating a strange disconnect between his youthful hair and older face. Fans and critics noticed, turning his ever-stable hairline into a punchline across pop culture. To make matters worse, The plug spacing was so unnatural that shaving his head wasn't even an option. The scarring would have been too visible. Shatner, locked into a cosmetic decision from the past, became a cautionary tale in the risks of chasing eternal youth. Sometimes, boldly going forward means accepting the natural course, not fighting it strand by strand. Tony Curtis and the cornrow catastrophe. Even Hollywood legends can fall victim to the curse of overcorrection. Starting in the 1960s, Some Like It Hot star Tony Curtis began a decades-long journey of hair transplants that left him with one of the most obviously altered hairlines in showbiz history. The outdated techniques created a bizarre cornrow-like pattern across his scalp. Makeup crews had to get creative on set, trying to blur the harsh geometry of his hair plugs under the cameras. As Curtis aged, the contrast became painfully clear. His transplanted hair stayed thick and dark, while the rest turned gray, giving him a two-tone look that was impossible to ignore. To hide it, he dyed everything the same color, but the result only added to the artificial effect. Obsessed with fixing it, Curtis kept going back under the knife, each time worsening the damage to his already scarred scalp. What started as a quest for youth ended up as a reminder that some fixes only dig the hole deeper. Mel Gibson's hairline detour. Into the uncanny. Sometimes, the road to looking younger leads straight into the uncanny valley. Though it came after Hollywood's golden age, Mel Gibson's hair transplant carried all the same flaws, and then some. The procedure left him with a sharply straight, overly dense hairline that clashed with his age and facial features. Hair restoration experts even dubbed it the forest fire effect. Thick patches of hair right next to bald spots, with no natural blend in between. To hide the unnatural look, directors relied on strategic lighting and camera angles, turning every shoot into a visual minefield. What stung most was that Gibson's natural recession gave him a mature, rugged edge, a perfect match for his roles in films like The Patriot and Edge of Darkness. Instead, the transplant gave him an artificial youthfulness that didn't line up with the rest of him. In trying to rewind the clock, Gibson lost a visual authenticity that had once made him so compelling. John Travolta's marker line misfire. For a man who danced through the 70s with iconic hair, the fallout came hard and fast. John Travolta's transplant journey kicked off in the 1980s as the once thick mane from Saturday Night Fever and Grease began to thin. The fix? A hairline so sharp and symmetrical, it looked like it was drawn on with a Sharpie. Unlike natural hairlines, which have subtle curves and variation, Travolta's surgical line was too perfect, too geometric, practically architectural. To make matters worse, the transplanted hair didn't match the texture or direction of his original strands, leaving an awkward divide right across his scalp. The casual, tousled style that once defined his charm was suddenly off-limits. And when his career reignited in the 90s, HD cameras and sharper lighting made every unnatural detail pop, drawing more public scrutiny than ever. Instead of blending into his comeback, his hairline became part of the conversation, a reminder that not every classic needs a reboot. Elton John's hair never left the launch pad. Even rocket men can crash on the runway. In the 1970s, before he became the king of wigs and glam, Elton John tried to fight hair loss the old-fashioned way, with a series of early hair transplants. The result was a patchy mess, thanks to crude punch graft techniques that left his scalp dotted with small circular plugs. Instead of covering his baldness, the uneven transplant created a strange geometric pattern of sparse hair growing in random directions. Styling it naturally was out of the question, and the visual disconnect only made things worse under stage lights and cameras. Eventually, Elton ditched the plugs and leaned fully into flamboyance, swapping failed surgery for fabulous wigs and show-stopping hairpieces. That pivot didn't just hide a bad transplant, it elevated his entire image. By turning his hair loss into a bold fashion choice, Elton transformed a cosmetic failure into a creative triumph. Sean Connery's hair had no license to thrive. Even 007 couldn't outsmart the era of bad hair science. In the early 1970s, Sean Connery, the original James Bond, underwent hair transplants that left him with a patchy, circular plug pattern across his scalp. The transplanted hair didn't just look artificial, it clashed with his natural texture and color, creating a jarring patchwork effect on camera. Instead of enhancing his iconic image, the surgery made him look less rugged and more reconstructed. Close-ups only made it worse, and eventually, Connery decided enough was enough. He ditched the plugs, embraced his baldness, and in doing so, became even more magnetic, a symbol of strength, maturity, and confidence. That bold move wasn't just personal, it was cultural. Connery proved that bald could be suave, opening the door for a new era of leading men who didn't need hair to own the screen.